countdown for the new year as BBC One lifts off with a new drama series, The Whole Family.
Hey. Sorry, I should introduce who I am. My name is Christopher Blake. I'm going to tell you a story, and no matter how absurd it gets, I want you to just stay with it. I encountered alien life. Real alien life. And, well, there was this man on the train. I'll try my best to paint an image of what happened. Thankfully, I happen to retain the majority of the details. Best place to start? New Year's Eve, just after I got off work. Just for context's sake, this happened in Bristol. And just in case you're hearing this in the future, I'm referring to the 31st of December, 1989. That, for me, being yesterday. Okay. Now, I was spending the evening chatting with some workmates. I remember I was slurring my words slightly. It was a loud night. However, I think I might have been raising my voice a bit of volume higher than I'd care to admit. Nonetheless, it got late, quickly, and soon my company had departed. I took in the surroundings. Not many patrons were left. I remember the loud chime of the door, however, resulting in a brief jump. I seemed to be on edge, but I quickly passed that off as the drinks. I took a glance at who had arrived in the bar. I found it briefly tricky to focus, but caught sight. There was a figure stood in the doorframe of the door. They appeared curiously tall, but what struck me as odd was their clothing. They were wrapped in a pitch-black cloak, almost like something from the 60s. But when I say pitch black, I mean as dark as the night sky. They had an equally dark and distressed top hat, which obscured their face from view. I quickly rationalized the oddly fitting attire as the result of a New Year's party somewhere nearby. I recalled seeing a few posters for one earlier that day. I then took a glance at my watch and saw the time. It must have been late because I recall hurriedly grabbing my coat and rushing out of the pub. I brushed past the figure on the way. They'd taken a seat near to the door and was seemingly staring at thin air. What quickly struck me as I exited, however, was the freezing breeze outside. It was chilling. I adjusted my coat as well as I could and stuck my hands deep in my pockets. The breeze left them numb. However, as they warmed, I felt a sharp pain in my left hand. Jolting it out, I realized I'd scraped it against my keys. Wasn't too bad though, so I concluded I'd rinsed it at the station. Oh, bit of context. I don't live in Bristol itself. I'm on the outskirts. The train line was my easiest way of getting to work, so I'd commute to it as often as my job called. You know, looking out the train window on the commute home is a beautiful experience. The bright lights of the cars and buildings dancing in a blur can be mesmerizing. Sorry, back on topic. I headed up the steep road toward the warm glow of the station. As I went, I was left with the feeling I was being watched. I quickly passed the thought by, though I was in the city. If someone was watching me, it shouldn't come as a shock. I continued the climb. However, being left to my mind seemed like a mistake. As I sobered up slightly, I remembered the figure in the pub, and suddenly I was hit with a realization. In my rush to leave the building, I had failed to spot that the remaining patrons seemed to have vanished. I quickly brushed it aside. I was more than likely misremembering. All the customers simply had moved seats. As I continued the walk, treading closer to the station, the anxious feeling remained. I started hearing footsteps behind me. The chances of them actually following me were slim, and all the same. Whilst I hate to admit it, I do have a strong fear of heights. And the last thing I wanted to do was look back at the steep climb I'd taken. I quickened my pace anyway. As I finally reached the station, I took a glance at the ticket booth. I'm not sure what compelled me to go through the effort of stopping and turning, but nonetheless I did. There was, however, no one within. I was left feeling slightly confused. I took in my surroundings and became even more baffled. It was New Year's Eve. The lack of anyone around felt wrong. After commuting to this place so frequently, I'd never experienced the building so quiet. I quickly remembered the supposed party, though. That made the most sense. I squeezed through the ever so slightly broken ticket barriers and arrived on the platform. The chill in the air once more hit me with a blast. I could see my breath in the air as clear as day. I checked my watch. 5 minutes until the next train going my way. Looking away, I once again noticed the chilling lack of company. The entire station was empty. I recalled a few crisp packets and canned drinks were lying aimlessly. Bristol felt like a ghost town. I tried to ignore the muted nature around me and paced up the platform toward the bathroom to rinse the scrape from earlier. I reached out to swing the door open, but was met with the thud of a locked entrance. It was peculiar for them to be closed so early, even on a night like that. The sound of footsteps, however, made me jump. I darted to look at who was approaching, and there they were once more, a cloaked figure. They seemed to be scanning the platform. Once they reached my side, they jolted to a stop on me, like some sort of machine. They began slowly approaching, continuing to stare. They began retreating backwards. I was unsure what to do. Run? Try to talk to them? Perhaps the party had left them drunk? No. Party. I remembered the flyers at work. Formal dress code only. This figure wasn't dressed for that kind of event. As they continued, keeping the same slow pace, I recognized the thuds of their feet from earlier, behind me on the street. I quickly concluded they must have been following me. A sudden horn, though, once more left me abruptly shaken. I took a glance behind me. It was my train, pulling into the station. I looked at my watch. It was 3 minutes ahead of schedule. But after all I'd experienced that evening, an early train seemed as normal as it could get. Within the train was a rush of passengers. As my train groaned to a stop, I jumped aboard the opening doors, banged against the nearest buttons, in hope it had just slammed the doors shut, and curiously enough, it did just that. I peeked through the small window on the door. The figure had stopped moving. They were simply staring straight at me, almost into me. I backed away from the door and took a long look at the carriage. It was absolutely packed. Business folk, families, partiers, football fanatics. Perfectly normal. Curiously though, there were 2 empty seats. Whilst I couldn't exactly work out why said seats were bare, I quickly grabbed one. I noticed a newspaper strewn below my seat and pulled it out, something to take my mind off the figure. The train groaned once more and began to pull out of the station. As I reached the first article, I was once again left with a startled buzz of this man approached me. Smiling, he asked if the seat by me was taken. Politely noted it was empty, and he eagerly sat down. It must have taken me a moment to take in just how dazzling his attire was. I recall it being along the lines of a crimson velvet coat, hair like a 70s rock star, a curiously contrasting hoodie tucked out of the said coat. He seemed old, but not old, more like that one cool Uncle Old. His rich Scottish accent was almost booming full. He poked his head over toward the paper I was attempting to distract myself with, and asked if he could take a look. Of course I offered it up, and he quickly snatched it. After a few awkward moments, it became apparent to me that he wasn't actually reading the paper. He was simply observing his surroundings in more detail, whilst attempting to hide his gaze from the other passengers. He spoke once more, almost whispering, "I don't think this is your train." I recall pulling a rather obnoxiously puzzled face, which he took note of, before continuing. He pointed in the direction of the other passengers and said the strangest things. He said they were an illusion, that I had to leave immediately. I was confused and tried to pass him off as some crazy partier, but something about his tone made me feel like I could trust his words. Slowly he beckoned for me to rise up from my seat. It took a moment, but I did so. I took a glance at the passengers and suddenly felt a wave of nausea. The man quickly noticed and obscured my view of them. He whispered that I mustn't look. He moved back and began to slowly sneak out of the seat. Despite telling myself this was absurd, I followed his stride. He pointed toward the door. Despite the fact that the train was clearly in motion, it seemed outside nothing was there but darkness. No buildings, no cars, nothing blurring past, just darkness. He noticed my concern and gave me a comforting pat before quickly switching his gaze toward the passengers, dropping to a look of fear. I wanted to turn around. I did, but he quickly stopped me, pulling me out and into the doorframe. I heard the most disturbing sounds behind me, something shrieking, shifting. Despite the nausea I seemed to experience prior when looking, the man moved on in complete focus. He quickly grabbed some sort of device out of his coat pocket. It looked like a mobile phone, but with strange crystals slapped onto it with duct tape. He promptly told me to open the door beside us and jump out. I protested. We were in the midst of movement, regardless of the blankness beyond. However, he simply ordered once more that I do it. Reluctantly, I strained, tugging it open. The breeze from seemingly nowhere flew into the carriage. I was once more met with the dark void. The churning of the engine was even more audible. It seemed to be picking up pace. I turned back to the man. He still had his eyes fixed upon whatever horror was occurring within the carriage. He spotted my frozen posture and shouted for me to jump. I frantically asked him what he was going to do. He had a look of sorrow in his eyes, but equally a look of confidence. In a flash, he grabbed a sort of ring on the side of the device and ripped it off. A chiming egg-like timer began as the train continued roaring at speed. The man yelled at me to go. As I approached the edge of the door, curiosity took the better of me, and I looked back at the passengers, a decision I'd regret. The passengers were gone. In their place was something like a snake, wrapping around the seats like vines. At its ends, it seemed to become morphed into the walls. Its head was massive, large fangs were bared out. It seemed to be frightened of the man, but equally prepared to attack. I took one last look at this strange man, fearing what might become of him. With a deep breath, I jumped out of the train, squeezing my eyes shut as I leapt into the void. I felt myself suddenly hit something hard. Opening my eyes, I was met with the overwhelming commotion of Bristol Station. I picked myself up. I'd fallen face first onto the platform. Remembering what I'd just experienced, I darted around. No train. I looked to my side, no cloaked figure. I let out a huge sigh of relief. I refused to board another train that night and rushed outside, rain splashing down hard on me. I quickly pulled over the nearest taxi. Breathing in the night air left another wave of ease on my mind. It was cold, but normal. As I entered the taxi, I spotted someone staring at me from the station. He was a bald fellow, wearing a strangely oversized duffel coat. He seemed to grow a look of concern over his face and began approaching the vehicle. I must have yelled at the driver to depart to my address, at the time seemingly dodging an interaction with whoever that man was. That night I locked my doors and windows tight. I didn't know what to do or what to think, or how to explain what happened. But I knew that what I experienced wasn't of this world. It can't have been. It had to have been from out there. And that man on the train, he saved my life. I don't know what would have happened if he wasn't there. If I'd ever have had the chance to leave that train, what that thing might have wanted from me, or why it was targeting me in the first place. Okay, now, why am I recording this? You see, the man, short, bald one, who was outside the station that night, he came into my workplace today. I knew he was looking my way and quickly left, ignoring the concerned pleads from my mates. I once again bolted down my house. I tried to dial the police, but I was met with no reception. I couldn't make sense of it. I've tried to work out what this guy could want. Perhaps he's working for the government, trying to cover whatever I encountered up. I don't know, but I hope that putting this on record will allow that night not to be lost entirely. It's past midnight, so I can only assume it's him at the door. I'm going to have to try and hide this tape. Thank you for listening this far, and I'm sorry if this knowledge somehow puts you in danger. Just, if you're in Bristol City in England, all I can say is this: don't trust anyone.
And that's a happy new year from all of us here at the BBC. Good night.